Good afternoon, everybody. I see that everybody's a bit restless. It's been a long summit. People have got flights to catch. I know you want to get up and stretch, so I'm not going to take too long. What I will do is just expand on what Michelle has said. She's captured quite a lot of my presentation. If you read the last conclusion of my State of Logistics report that I wrote in 2024, I wrote about the ecstatic environment in which Transnet are actually transforming themselves, and I captured that in that report because we knew by November last year that was the plan that was going to be rolled out. Before I start, I was going to mention something to Justin, but I see Justin has left the room. I didn't do a video last night because I had this opportunity to address him, so I'm hoping he's going to come back into the room just now. But having said that, I'm going to just take something that Thomas mentioned in his presentation, and I'm going to use it as my theme. If we continue to do what we're doing, we are going to be in big trouble. We're in big trouble right now, I can tell you that. And if we continue to carry on in the fashion we're carrying on in the port environment, we're going to be in some serious trouble. We have a plan on how to get us out of that trouble, and that plan is going to require collaboration from everybody in this room. That's why I'm so ecstatic to be here today, because this journey that I presented to the CGA board in terms of how we're going to go forward with the logistics, or the plan that I put forward, is not going to be something that I'm going to be able to do alone. It's going to be a collaborative effort to jointly try and shape this environment into where we think it needs to go. So I think just in terms of what I presented to the board is, as we move forward, how are we going to focus on the logistics strategy around the CGA, and that's not just the CGA strategy, it's an industry-wide strategy the way I see it. In terms of what Michelle said and optimization within Transnet, we've got to optimize our environment as well, because the cost of inefficiency is extremely expensive, and we've got to try and find a way to create more efficiency in our port systems, and I've got a little bit of a plan to try and see how we can do that. Then the rail aspect, which Michelle drew on, we see the environment opening up for rail, but what now? What do we do? What next? How are we going to get back into rail in a substantial way than what we are at the moment? And then the last one, I'm glad Minister Mayer is here, because I'd like to draw on his attention to that. When we go into looking at more sustainable environments around logistics, I just want to draw your attention just to something which I think is quite unique, and something we're not doing in the industry, which maybe we should start looking at as an inspiration to draw on to expand on what you're currently doing and looking at trying to innovate in your logistics space. Before we do that, we just got to understand that when we look at logistics, we look at logistics from each region's corridor. Each corridor is very diverse in its characteristics. Here in the Eastern Cape, where Michelle grew up, what happens here is fundamentally different to what happens in Durban and fundamentally different to what happens in Cape Town. The needs in these areas are fundamentally different. By and large, it's very similar, but fundamentally different. I just want to draw your attention to the volume outlook. Now, we've obviously had a lot of presentations on this, but I think it's important just to recapture this, because what I see going forward, if you just focus on the right-hand column where you see those red lines, the northern region, we've seen quite a decline in exports coming from the north, quite substantially so in last year. And the presentations I've been doing over the last couple of months, I've been drawing on that. When is that going to change? I don't know, but when it changes, we better be ready, because the outlook, we haven't even brought Mozambique and Botswana into the picture. Tashius, if I bring 1 million cartons for you, if I bring 1 million cartons for Botswana, we add that to the 108, it's going to take us to 110 million cartons from the north. Substantial volume coming from there. We've got to be prepared. Eastern Cape, Henny, I mentioned to you that I was worried about that 54.5 million cartons, but what I've actually alluded to here is the growth in navals we didn't actually anticipate. That's where the deficit number was. If you look at the naval volume out of Eastern Cape, it's actually growing. Paul and I looked at navals and we actually deflated the navals, but in fact, the Eastern Cape is growing. And I think it's because of the Cambias have been growing there. So 56 million is probably a good projection we can reevaluate in the Eastern Cape considering that. The Western Cape, the navals are actually also in decline. So maybe a little bit less in the Western Cape, but in the total picture, 210 million cartons is what I'm planning around logistics, and obviously from a corridor perspective aligned to that volume. And when we relook at the Vision 260, I think we'll go back and I'll motivate that we look at these volumes. On the container side, now this is where the big complexity comes in, and this is where I'm saying we've got to change the way we do things. The container volumes, if you have a look what's happened in the northern region, from 50,000 containers last year down to 42,000 containers, that was a God-saving for the environment, because we know that Durban had some significant challenges, and had they done the 56,000 containers that were initially planned, I can promise you we would have been in some serious trouble. This year, if the northern regions maybe don't go to that sort of estimate that we saw earlier, 90-something million cartons, it might be another godsend. I do think, Michelle, we're probably going to see Pier 1 and Pier 2 just needs a bit of a a gap to let them get those equipment in there to rebalance the operations and get an uptake there. What I would like to also allude to is the other areas as well. PE, you can see the growth rate in terms of those numbers I just showed you. If you see the SRV, now this is the interesting one. If the conventional vessels, as we know, is in a rapid state of decline globally, they're not building the tonnage that is keeping pace. If we keep the projection going with that, we get to about 122,000 containers. Durban goes to 58. This environment goes to 34,000. Cape Town 25. If the specialized reefer vessels fall away altogether in the next 3 to 5 years, and I'm estimating that we're going to see a substantial decline in that, when Ukraine and Russia sign that peace deal, the container lines are going to start flowing much more easier than what they are now, so there's going to be a lot more pressure moving those containers into Russia, and what we're seeing on the breakbulk vessels as one example. If that happens, we're going to see 130,000 containers in the next 3 to 5 years. Now, that is a substantial requirement. Thomas says they're building ships, it's great. Are the shipping lines building reefer containers to match this? Let's hope so. The northern region goes up to 63. Now, that's a really big number. And if you look at what needs to go through the ports every week, it's substantial. The same in this region, the same in Cape Town. So that's why I say, let's up the game and let's change the environment, because if we continue what we're doing at the moment in the port space, it's going to cause a lot of constraint. Clearly, from Benjamin Franklin, everyone knows the saying, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. So let's make a plan. What I presented to the board is, when I joined the CGA, my focus was purely project-based. It was more around trying to get the rail space opening up, to increase the rail opportunities. The Maputo port was another one. Both of them have actually been in decline. That was my main focus, but I think you all understand why that is. What I've proposed to the board is we separate the logistics portfolio into 3 main areas. Now, my attention over the last sort of 10 years has been more on an operational focus, dealing with Transnet, dealing with all the operational issues, taking my focus away from the project element, which has become actually quite important, because on the project side, we still need to see efficiencies, we need to see cost reduction, we need to see project implementation. Maputo, rail, as Michelle said, the rail's opening up, we've got to start focusing on that. I've also spoken to my CRI colleagues. We've got a lot of operational research we need to do on cold chain and technical matters. The important one is, what do we do on operations? And I've actually put a proposal to the industry that we collaborate some way with, as an industry-wide body, in terms of all the associations, being table grapes, SATI, Hortgrow, Citrus, have a direct operational focus where we create the structure, where we have a head of operations, we have people that are actually deployed down in the ports, here in PE, somebody in Cape Town, somebody in Durban. And coupled to that is a operational efficiency project that I'd like to propose. Michelle, we've already lobbied this with Solly. He's quite interested to get behind it, and I'll outline that in a few moments. So creating a structure, and if we do it together as a collaborative effort as the fruit industry, it just makes more sense, because the resources can then be allocated to focus on Cape Town through the entire year, not just focus on citrus, and then the guy doesn't do anything in the deciduous season. So that's what I would say as we go and have a discussion through either Fruit South Africa or Mark through FPF. Try and see if we can find a way to collaboratively find a way to address the operational challenges we're seeing at the moment. In Cape Town, Thomas, you might not know, but there's actually ships that have been there for 30 some odd days. The MSC Antonella has been on our coast for 44 days, only leaving on Saturday. Catastrophic. So we've got to find a way to better that environment, to make sure we address those inefficiencies in our shipping system. Obviously, on the strategy side, I think it's quite self-evident, as we, as a collective from the CGA side with Bachoko, with our CGA, we look at going into government and all the relevant structures to ensure that our long-term Vision 260 structure and vision is brought to their attention. Just going on this operational mess, and I can tell you, if you spend a season in the port, and I spent a lot of time here at the Eastern Cape last year, in Durban, it's an absolute chaotic situation. It's just absolutely not sustainable. We cannot just leave it the way it is at the moment. What it is actually is what this causes. There's no communication, collaboration amongst transporters, depots, cold stores, the terminals, the shipping lines. There's no visibility in the supply chain. It's more of a push system rather than a pull system into the terminals. And I think we want to try and reverse that around to create more of a pull system rather than a push system. If I can just quickly go through this optimization and what it represents. The wind, as Michelle has alluded to, is a very serious problem. In Cape Town, as I mentioned, we've got ships that are currently standing there for 30 days because they've been backlogged due to weather. In PE last year, it was a seriously big issue. The terminals were probably not operational more because of wind than they were operational without wind. So it has become a really big challenge, and I believe we've got to find ways to mitigate this wind impact. I don't know what they are, but I think collectively we should find solutions around that. Wind recoveries, terminal strategies, post-wind recoveries, all of that kind of stuff needs to be looked at. Truck booking optimization, it's a real big challenge for us in terms of truck bookings. You wouldn't believe that there's actually people sitting behind a PC 24 hours a day waiting to find a slot to get into a terminal to deliver a truck. It's unbelievably crazy. Sometimes you're waiting 10 or 12 hours with a loaded container to try and get a container into the terminal. We could do much better than that. We can't have fruit standing without power outside terminals trying to get a slot booking into the terminals. So we've got to work with Transnet to optimize this truck booking system. It really does have value, but we've got to optimize it to make sure it works for the collective of Transnet and the industry as well. We also have a coordinated approach around the utilization of the truck booking system so that everybody gets a fair opportunity to deliver their containers into the terminal, not have to wait for 10 hours or 12 hours. Once a container is packed, we've got to find a way to make sure it goes to terminal as soon as it's packed and gets a booking slot. The most important part of this project is actually now trying to find a way to create an online planning platform where from the cold store side, once they've done a plan to load a container, that plan is visible to the transporters and to Transnet so that we understand in the ecosystem what is available to be packed for a specific vessel and then manage that aspect from the cold store into the terminal through that integrated planning approach with this online planning platform. We have daily operational needs with Transnet, so once we understand this plan in the ecosystem, we sit with Transnet and we say, right, let's roll out this plan, make sure everybody in the ecosystem is part of this plan, and we make sure the plan rolls out to ensure synchronization of the containers. Obviously, we know there's back of port capacity. In this area specifically, there's a number of container plug points that are available which we can utilize to ensure that the efficiency of the cold stores remain, and then obviously optimize that flow from those plug-in points into the port. The plug capacity of the terminals is finite. With this growth, we do not have the opportunity to just create capacity in the terminals. I can tell you that now. Transnet have done what they can to optimize and maximize their reefer capacity. Beyond that, it's going to be up to us to try and create that capacity. The capacity that's available needs to be made efficient and maximized to its best opportunity. So we've got to get into that space as we grow to manage that capacity as best we can. Integrated planning, making sure that Transnet know what is being packed or what's available to be packed per vessel, making sure that the stack dates are aligned to what's actually in the ecosystem, not just planning for a vessel. Much more integrated approach to stack planning and making sure that what's available goes into terminal. Bit more coordination on stack planning relative to vessel movement. So that's really the optimization project in a nutshell. I don't think it's too complicated. I think the most complicated part is creating an online system, collaboration amongst the ecosystem to actually jump on board and support this, and then integrate with Transnet so we can have a collective plan on how to optimize this environment. Without this, I can tell you now, we're going to be in some serious trouble. We're in trouble. It's only going to be bigger trouble when more volume comes through. Right, having said that, let me just quickly outline the opportunity on rail. Michelle has captured a lot of what I was going to say here. I do think, Michelle, in my personal opinion, I think the biggest issue we're going to be faced here is the amount of capital we need to go and invest in locomotives, invest in the equipment that we need to move containers. That is a substantial investment if we're going to meet the objective and targets that we've set for rail transportation. We have partners like Steinweg, we've got partners like the shipping lines who are in this space, we've got CTI in the space. They're going to need to have a long-term commitment to go and invest this huge amount of capital to run these trains. Do we have the will amongst the growers and exporters to give a 20-year, as an example, commitment to go and roll out this? I don't have the answer for it, but I think that is going to be one of our biggest challenges, is how we're going to raise the capital to invest in this opportunity. Michelle alluded to the short-distance rail terminals. Absolutely fantastic what's happening in Durban. FPT got cold stores, Preco got cold stores, Maersk are building cold stores there. The short-term opportunity to rail containers from there into the port is great. It's going to distract from all the trucks that are going into the terminal, rail into the terminal much more efficiently than trucks. This is a really great approach that is coming into the Durban environment. Michelle expanded on Balcon, also what's happening here in the Eastern Cape. I've also put out there everything that I think is practically possible in terms of rail. As you can see, I've put ADA in terms of short haul. Practically, they could do it, but whether they could do it feasibly and sustainably against road transport is another question. But I think those exercises, if I can call on, say, an SRCC or ADA cold store, just to look at that exercise and see if they can get into the space. The big one that I see in terms of long distance is obviously coming from Johannesburg down to Durban, City Deep to Durban. Everything north of City Deep has been de-lined, decabled, so they've got to go as diesel locomotives. Also, when you go through the parcel lines north, it's the efficiency aspect starts to become a big problem. So my understanding, and I think the collective view of a lot of people on this, is that Johannesburg to Durban is actually where our biggest opportunity lies. And we're focusing in Marble Hall at the moment to try and see how we can get the Marble Hall area adapted into the rail space via City Deep, so that we can then, once they get into the space and we can see that it's actually feasible and sustainable, we can then start to bring the other areas into whatever's been developed there. We have a rail project that is being commissioned, and we're going to send out a proposal quite soon for that viewpoint and study that's going to come back to show us how to go about doing that. The Maputo corridor, as Thomas alluded to, there's a lot of potential there. That also needs a huge amount of collaboration amongst exporters to align to, say, a cooperation between FPT, DP World, and Grindrods, so to speak, to build a cold store on this side of the border so that they can start doing pre-clearance inspections down to the port to get into the Far East markets. We heard that the Far East markets are where, obviously, the industry is going to go, and I think there's going to be huge potential on that as well. That corridor we can run via CFM or by a private operator as well. I just want to expand on something just to show you that we've got to have a change, in my view, in the way we are doing the rail operations. To give you an idea, when the containers land in Durban empty, most of the containers that are coming and being landed in the port are coming empty, the way I see it. Those empty containers are having to be transported to the depots to go and get cleaned, some 30 kilometers away from port. They're transported back to the container terminal, put on the trains, and they're going empty all the way from Durban up to City Deep, or as far as Bella Bella in the case of the GoGo Group. You're paying for that empty leg to move those containers from the port, from the depot, to the container terminal inland, at about 6,000 to 8,000 Rand a container. There's where we can try and see how to eliminate that cost by working with other industries. Then those containers obviously moved from City Deep, as an example, to the cold stores and loaded and brought back and railed down to the port. For me, in the long term, I don't see that as being sustainable. I do think there's a way we can look at changing, and I'm glad that all of the shipping lines that are in our space are actually here and represented today. I do want to ask, is there an opportunity that these containers that are coming empty, can we not bring goods from overseas in these containers, particularly for the motor industry, huge motor industry in Johannesburg requiring components from all around the world, the retail environment, a massive space that we can get into. Can we collectively talk about trying to get these containers coming into our shores with goods in on this project to rail them up? We can save the farmers that 6,000 Rand or 8,000 Rand a train. We can pay from Johannesburg down to Durban and use those containers to export. That is where BFAP has got the number. I do believe that if we work with the shipping lines, and I do think the shipping lines have got the best opportunity to actually unfold this model for us. They have the ships, they have the containers, they have the capital, and they have the Transnet commercial agreements. So my belief is that if you're going to get into the rail space, you should partner with the shipping lines, because they're the ones that actually make it. If you don't have the containers, and we're talking about 600 to 800 containers a week, if you don't have the containers, you don't have a rail business. And I'll give you an example. The Enstra cold store, Andre Katuri, called me about 2 or 3 years ago, and he said, listen, I can't get this cold store to operate profitably. I can't get the clients to come in. And I said to him, it's simple. If you don't have an alignment with the shipping line that can guarantee you the service, guarantee the containers, you're going to battle. He went from Enstra, they opened up a facility called CTR. He partnered with the shipping lines, and they're now running 2 or 3 trains a week out of City Deep. That's the example of how we go about it. We've got to work with the shipping lines. They are the ones that are going to carry this business forward, and we've got to start getting into the space. I'm going to call on the guys to see if we can talk about how do we get this approach implemented. Another very interesting project is the Rail Runner. This is a very unique and exciting opportunity. There's no actual implementation of this project locally, so it's a concept idea. We did a presentation in Marble Hall on this towards the beginning of the year. What it is basically trucks that are built to be adapted to a bogie, and those trucks go on trains down to the port. How this actually works is the trucks go from the pack house, so you're packing your fruit into them. They're actually refrigerated trucks. They're also PBS trucks, which I'm going to show you now. They then go to rail siding. The rail siding can be anywhere. If you have a look at the red dots, I've evaluated all the practical places in the north, down south, Carcamas, they can actually develop this model. And we're again focusing on Marble Hall to try and see if we can develop this project. So where we are with this, we've designed a specific fruit trailer. I've sat with the manufacturers to make sure that the trailer is adaptable for the industry, not just citrus, but all the other fruit commodities. We've made it adaptable for maximizing pallet capacity. We did the workshop in Law Corp to outline the project. We've now got that committee that wants to do a study in terms of the practicality of this. And we're hoping to try and get a trial implementation of this set quite soon so we can see that it actually works and adapts to our industry and we can start to roll it out. And I won't talk on the next point there. Okay, just to conclude, as I say, I'd like to just give an example of something which is quite unique. And it's being used in a huge way on the tipper truck industry down to Richards Bay. Almost 60-70% of trucks are running PBS. So these are performance-based trucks. They are longer, they have more axles, they have a bigger payload. If you ride up the N11, you see hundreds of these trucks running on the freeways. Now, the big question is, how do we adapt this type of technology into the citrus industry, and can it be adapted? And I'm going to give you just an example to let your minds just think about this, and in your environment you can gauge whether you think it's a practical solution or not. This truck by Goldfields coming up the N11 there, it's a 22-meter length truck. Its gross vehicle payload mass is 52 tons. So from 34 tons, which is a conventional, you now can put 52 tons on this truck. Having said that, you've just got to be aware that these trucks cannot just run from point A to point B at will. You've actually got to have a permit from each province, and that's why I'm glad Mr. Minister is here. If you're running, let's say, from Letsitele down to Durban, you'd have to have a permit from Limpopo, from Mpumalanga, from Orange Free State, and from KZN. You have to have approved concept, and you have to have an agreement where that truck can go from A to B. So it's not practical for the entire industry. Because of our seasonality, you're not going to get long-run benefits of this. Perhaps in short-run benefits, maybe you could do so if you can adapt it somewhere and move it somewhere else. Maybe transport is looking at it. I'm busy working with HN Peterson Boerdery in Marble Hall. He's very aggressively looking at the PBS application. We're going to do some trials with them in terms of what the payload masses are and where we can see this fitting into our industry. This is the most exciting opportunity I think we can on PBS application. Reinhardt Transport about a month ago did this trial, and I was ecstatic to see this because I remember about 2 years ago someone said to me, Mitch, why don't you do a trial on running 2 containers behind a single horse? And I was like, this guy is absolutely mad. But they've actually gone and done it. As you can see, the trailer's got 2 12-meter containers behind it. It's running between a dolly. So the payload mass, as you can see on the bottom there, goes to 63 tons. We need to do a practical test if we're going to put gensets and diesel bowsers on these in terms of the weight application for citrus, but we're going to do the trials. Where I think this is going to be a really great application, if we look at from Marble Hall down to Johannesburg, we just need one application with Gauteng and Limpopo, run 2 containers down to City Deep, wherever the cold store is, run empties back to that using a single horse traction with 2 containers behind it. That's a great application. Further to that, from inland down to port, we'll have to see. There's quite a lot of very bumpy sort of hills. We need all those permits. This is also great because, Minister Mayor, if we are able to move these containers from the citrus industry to the tablecape industry, you can run a single horse with 2 containers behind it from Cape Town to Kakamas or Orange River, wherever, and run 2 containers back to port. We can have long-run cost benefits on this between the industries together collaboratively if transporters are able to move these around. I know the Western Cape province, and that's why I'm calling it, has some restriction on this, and I'd like us to have a discussion to see if we can start implementing this. It's the only way we're going to find sustainable transport solutions. We've seen the cost structures in our industry. We see the sustainable demand coming in. So that's why I'm presenting this to you today, because I think we've got to start finding ways of becoming more sustainable and cost-effective in our industry. And that's the end for me. Thank you very much, everybody.